Welcome to Get to Know with me, Morgan Williams. I've been in the creative industry for over a decade and meet people in different roles every day. But here's my secret. I don't always know what it is they actually do. So here I am getting to know. Each week, I sit down with industry insiders, learning what it is they actually do all day long. Whether you're trying to break into the industry, feeling a little bit lost, or just plain curious, Get to Know is here to dish out creative career insights and advice. So let's dive right into this episode. Welcome to the last episode of the season. This week, I get to know Jack Morgan, a head of creative. I'm so glad to have Jack on, as he's brutally honest about his experience figuring out what he wanted to do. And it wasn't until after a talk with a friend that he figured out his niche, which got him to where he is today. His story is one of passion and persistence. This is the episode for you if you're looking for a role within any part of the creative industry. Before we start this episode, I have something really exciting to announce. We're throwing our first ever networking event to celebrate the end of season 1 of this podcast. If you've enjoyed any of the episodes, join me and a selection of my guests at Fujifilm House of Photography in London on September 19th for a fun evening of connecting with fellow creatives. Whether you're an industry veteran or just starting out, this event is open to all and the perfect chance to expand your network. Don't miss out, grab your free ticket on Eventbrite, link in bio. So hey Jack, thanks for joining me today. How are you?
I'm very well, thank you for having me on, I appreciate it.
No, it's great to have you on. I think a really good place to start would be, could you introduce yourself and tell us what it is that you do?
Yes, so my name is Jack and I am currently the head of creative. My background has been, the creative industry for the past nearly 9 years now. I started off in fashion, moved into fitness, done a bit of different things along the past 8-9 years. But yeah, currently I'm in a role of head of creative. So I lead an in-house team of creatives and work with freelancers on a variety of creatives, both in product and marketing campaigns.
Let's go back to the beginning then. How did you get your start in the industry? What did you start off doing? Because I think you started in styling, is that right?
I did, yes. So way back when, I went to uni to be a photographer, and I found a course in Surrey that was a fashion promotion and imaging course. And on that course, you could either do photography, styling, or graphics. And I was like, nope, going to do photography. I want to do it. Got there, and I had just had this internal fear that I didn't understand how to use the cameras and didn't understand how to use the settings. And I was like, I panicked and thought, okay, I'm just going to do the styling thing. Never even thought of fashion before, never even thought of styling, didn't even really know what it was apart from it's quite self-explanatory. I didn't know the ins and outs of it. And I took that route. So across the 3 years of uni, I studied in Milan for 1 semester. And then, like I said, I was in London and Surrey for the rest. But the one key thing that I think gave me that head start was the moment I got to uni, I started getting experience. So the moment I got there, I didn't wait until the 2nd or 3rd year when most people went and looked for internships. I thought, right, I've got time now. Technically, I say paid for time, but you've got your student loan. You've got some space in your week. Go and get as much experience while you can, because it's very likely, unfortunately, you're going to have to work for free. So you might as well do it now.
Yeah.
And to be honest, I think I was fueled by some sort of fear. I didn't want to get to the end of uni and feel panic. So I thought, let's just get as much experience as I can now. So that's what I did. And I started assisting different stylists. I started reaching out to PR companies. I was even just delivering Fashion Week invites, but any sort of experience I could get, I took it, because I didn't know exactly what it was I wanted to do. I didn't know exactly what it was I was good at, but I thought, I've got this opportunity to dip my finger in as many things as I can and meet as many people as I can. Because I understood quite early on that, yes, it is a skill-based business and passion-based business, being creative, especially working in fashion, but being creative in general. You have to have a real burning desire to do it. Mm-hmm. But also I knew that it would be network that would help or not help in some cases. So yeah, that was my start. I then left uni and went straight into being freelance. And that was off the back of doing an internship in the e-com studio at Selfridges. And I never had any sort of plan to be self-employed, to be freelance. I just took a 2-week internship, and then they were like, "Do you want to come back and like be an assistant?" And I was like, "Great! Like I'm actually getting paid to do wasn't very much, but I got paid to do something. I thought this is great." And yeah, I did that for I think maybe 2-3 years. I can't really remember off the top of my head. And then I started getting into different things. Like I met you when I was at ASOS, and I was doing a bit of styling there and like coordinating. And I actually really enjoyed that. You got to meet different people every day. It was quite a system-based thing. But yeah, after the styling and after I was doing that for maybe 2 to 3 years, in my personal life, I then got into fitness. And this was before there was this big boom around COVID where every single brand done fitness lines and sports lines. So I was really trying to figure out how on earth can I make this shift? How can I move from fashion to fitness? And now it seems like such a seamless like transition and something you wouldn't need to think much about. But I felt so stuck on it for such a long time. And I'd meet up with my friends. I always had friends that were in the industry that were a few years older than me. So speaking to them like was always super inspiring. And one of my friends was like, "Jack, I don't understand what you're finding so difficult. Like, you're exactly who you are. It's everything that you love. And you're already being creative. So why don't you just start doing test shoots that are fitness focused?" And I did exactly that.
Great
It was like,
advice.
yeah, it sounded so simple. And in my head, it was such a block. It was this huge mountain that I had to climb to make this shift. And I thought I've got to like figure out the perfect plan of how to get there and all the steps along the way. But the one thing I think what's so beautiful about being early in your career is every single day you can wake up, especially if you're like self-employed or even if you're not self-employed, you can wake up and redefine yourself every day as a creative. If you want to say tomorrow, like, I'm now going to tell myself I'm a video editor. Yes, by the industry standards, you might not be a video editor yet. But if you're putting the time in and you're putting the work in, you will be that person. And you have to truly believe it, because it sounds like a bit wish-washy to say, but the moment you start kind of identifying with that dream and believing in that dream, things will start to fall in place. And that is what happened to me. So I started like to stop defining myself as a stylist. When I would meet people in professional settings, I would introduce myself as Jack, of course, but then I would tell them what I did was creative direction for fitness brands, or that I worked in health and fitness. And soon enough, people just started knowing me as that person. And then I was in a very lucky position where, like I mentioned, there hadn't been this boom yet in the industry of fitness. And it then meant that everyone within like my fashion circle knew what I was passionate about, could see it because I was always posting about it. I must have been so annoying on Instagram, especially when I joined like, the CrossFit cult. It's all I did. So when things came up, like, oh, they heard of jobs that might have been related to fitness, they were like, oh, I know the perfect guy for that. And then they'd like put me forward for it.
Yeah.
And I think because of that, I got jobs quite early on that now I look back on and I would love to do them campaigns again now. Like if I got contacted now for those campaigns, I would be buzzing. I mean, I was back then, but I was like maybe 23 when I was on set for Puma, like directing a set of like maybe 20, 30 people in total and leading the creative across like 3 different locations with 3 models and getting to work with these friends of mine that were photographers and videographers. And I remember going to sleep that night, like with a huge smile on my face, being like, this is the best day of my life. Like I've made this happen and I'm surrounded by people that I respect.
I love that. Do you know what?
Yeah.
I've got so many questions off of everything that you've just
Sorry,
said.
I just like hammered through it. Got excited.
No. It's amazing. And like I think when you're talking about experience and how you started getting that experience from like the get-go, first year of uni, get that experience.
Yeah.
I think that's like one of the main things. It's actually a bit of a recurring theme throughout all these conversations that I've had for the podcast so far. Everyone is building up that network just from the different experiences that they've had. And then if, someone like a stylist isn't available for a shoot, then they have a friend who's available. And it's just getting to know all of those people. Are you still in touch with anyone that you started off with that experience with now?
In terms of people that I like assisted, no, but the photographers and some of the stylists that I first ever worked with are like some of my closest friends still.
Yeah, which I think is amazing.
Yeah. And I feel so grateful that I have that. And I think now I look back on that, again, it's funny, like I always thought that everybody had the kind of like network of friends and that I had. I just thought it was a given.
Yeah,
And it's not. People don't
no,
put the work into that. And it's one of the skills I think you have to learn. And it's one of the things of bravery that you have to learn. Like there is courage in vulnerability. And there's things that are very scary about putting yourself out there and connecting yourself with people. But drop those emails, drop them DMs, message them on LinkedIn. Like don't hound them, but like take those leaps because you don't know who's going to say yes, and
yeah,
you don't know who's going to connect you to the next person. Or if I'm speaking to you, for example, I don't know what career move you're going to take next. You might take a career move that aligns perfectly with where I want to head, and then in the future you can help me out.
yeah,
Like it's not just about putting everything out on Instagram and like getting all those followers. It doesn't really matter. It's about building those really authentic relationships. And it takes time. It's not something you can rush. And it takes time to like find your crowd as well. But I would say on the flip side of that, whether you find your crowd or not, as I mentioned earlier, the main thing is about having that passion. And unfortunately, when you do have to do this work for free, it's about that drive that's going to pull you through to be like, okay, this is going to be worth it. What can I learn in this situation? Like I remember my family being like, oh, are you getting paid for this one? And I was like, no. And they're like, come on, you need to be getting paid. And I was like, it's not about that.
hmm
I was so grateful to be around a set for a day and to see what was going on. And I think you have to be on set and in those rooms to start understanding what sort of role is right for you, which
yeah,
I'm sure we'll get onto for me. But I
yeah.
started to shift and change. But
No,
yeah,
I
get
totally agree with that. I think I learnt stuff in uni, definitely, but I think I definitely learned more by being there and being on the set and rubbing shoulders with the people who do it every day, isn't it? That like you get to know it and you get to have a feel for, oh, what does that person do over there? I'm actually quite interested in that, which might be something completely different than what you're currently doing, you know?
100%. I would also say as well, the way that I would, like some people say, ask, oh, would you ever go back to uni? And I'm like, yes, in a heartbeat. Because I think when you get older, you start to appreciate, God, how amazing to get given 3 years to like learn about
Yeah,
something you're passionate about. Sometimes when you finish school and go to uni, you've been in education for God knows how many years, you're fed up with it. But I would say for anyone that is at uni or is thinking about going to uni, yes, look at that 3 years as a time to get a qualification and get education and learn as much as you can from like your peers and your tutors, but see it as a block of time. You've got 3 years to be creative, trial and error. You've probably got resources at your fingertips because if you're at a creative uni, there's going to be studios, there's going to be cameras, there's going to be other people that want to be involved in this whole production. Use that time. See that as your most valuable tool because once you graduate and you're in full-time work or you're trying to like just pay your bills, things do become more difficult and you
yeah.
start having to make other sacrifices. So yeah, utilize that as much as you can. Timing.
Definitely. I think that is such a good piece of advice because I remember when I got my first full-time job in London in the creative industry
Mm,
and I was like, I'm still going to shoot on the side, I'm still going to do that and you just don't really have the time to do that or the resources or the space and all of those things. And yeah, you're building your network because you're working with people more and more every day, but you've really got to try really hard when you've
yeah,
got the full-time job to do your passion projects,
yeah,
whereas when you're in uni you have that time, you just take advantage of it.
yeah.
That's actually a really really good piece of advice.
It takes I think it takes more than even like grit and determination to still be creative at the end of a full working week.
Yeah,
Like
100%.
it's tough. Especially when you're early in your career and there feels like there's so much at stake and you want to feel like you're putting the right step forward all the time and getting things right. But I think looking back that time, and I'm sure everyone says this on your podcast, that is the time to make mistakes. Like it doesn't matter what
Yeah,
you were doing and trying out at like 18, 19, 20, 21, probably even all the way up to like maybe where I am now. Maybe I'll look back and think, God, 29, it wasn't even that old. But the further you progress in your career, the less like internal flexibility you have to think that you can fluctuate through different things. But yeah, take the opportunity and that time to meet people, to try things, to test things, to be creative, and to fail and figure out what you don't like doing. I think that's more important than anything in life. It's a bit like dating. You know, you got to figure out what you don't like before you can figure out what you do want, and it will come.
Yeah, no, definitely. I think another really good piece of advice that you touched upon as well was that point where you started referring to yourself as creative director and in fitness. I think I had another conversation with Amy Jakes, who's a journalist, and she said, just start writing and call yourself a journalist. Don't call yourself an aspiring journalist. Call yourself a journalist because you are a journalist. And that just really reminded me of that. And I think it's one of those things, I guess people would call it like manifestation these days, isn't it? But you've got to put yourself into that space to be given those opportunities. So if you want to be a creative director, call yourself a creative director. Yeah, you might not be the best creative director out there, but you've got to, like you said, trial and error, learn, fail, but call yourself a creative director. You're going to learn and you're going to succeed and you're going to meet people that will put you forward for jobs.
Yeah,
That's
100%.
just kind of how it works, isn't it?
It is. And I think the moment you start feeling belief in yourself when you're saying those things,
Yeah.
the way I think of it is like when I'm going in for an interview or a new meeting with a brand, especially when I was younger, I was like, even if I don't feel confident in myself, I need to make these people feel confident in me. And if I need to pull out that GCSE drama and let them think that I am the top, then that's what I need to do. Because essentially, especially as a creative director, you're there to direct, you're there to lead, and that's what brands are going to be putting their money and time and faith in you to do. So you need to make sure that you can hold yourself in a way that holds some sort of like confidence in a room, because when it comes down to shoot day and concepting and pitching and creating the decks, that's on you. So in whatever role you're going to go into, when you start to make that shift, just have unwavering confidence in yourself. Even if you need to switch it on like an alter ego before you go into a room, like, because I haven't got the confidence that I might show that I have. I just have to like switch it on. Similar to what I'm doing now. I'm doing a podcast. Like what? Yeah, I got to switch on that broadcaster mind. But yeah,
No.
that is part of it. Belief, self-belief, but it's got to come with a level of everyone is the whole fake it till you make it thing. It's real. Everyone has to do it.
100%. I'm such a big believer in fake it till you make it. So let's talk about that Puma shoot that you mentioned.
Yes.
How did that come about? And how did you actually feel being in charge of like 20, 30 people on set as well?
So a hair and makeup artist who's a very good friend of mine, we've been friends for like 7-8 years now. I met her on a shoot when I was styling. And like I said earlier, I just started to constantly talk about what I wanted to do. And I was constantly posting about fitness and CrossFit and this shift that I'd had that I loved. And she just dropped me a call one day, and there was an agency that she'd done a lot of work with, and she was like, look, that they're looking for someone, they need help on this shoot. Could you come and help them? Can I put you in touch? And I was like, of course I can help. This would be amazing. And I actually met with the job they put me on first wasn't actually a fitness shoot. It was actually a shoot for Disney, and it was a kids shoot. And this is something I'd never done before. Like working with kids was not something I ever thought I would do or want to do. Working with children's product was something I never thought I could do too. But I knew that this agency had done all of this other sort of work that I absolutely wanted to do. So I thought if I impress them on this shoot, then it just gets my foot in the door. It just gets me in the room with them for 1 hour if I'm lucky on a conversation. And I got told I think it was on like a Thursday, but from this agency, they were like, look, we've got 4 creative directors that are putting together ideas for this shoot that are pitching, but we need them all by end of day Monday. and I was due to go away with my family that weekend, and I thought, this is like the biggest opportunity I've had in my career so far. I've got to give this everything. And I went overboard with this. I cancelled the plans. I spent every single hour of that weekend working on this concept. I think I produced like a 60-page deck, which is way too long. Don't be
Oh,
making a
yeah.
60-page deck. Yeah, I was just like, I need this. I was doing like set sketches, like lighting setups, graphic design, video storyboards, photography direction, like all of it. I mean, if I look back on the deck now, it's probably not that good. But I just thought I actually didn't know what they'd be expecting of me, especially as they were an agency that worked with so many big brands. I thought, I have no idea what I'm competing with. So I just need to give it my all. And if it's too much, it's too much. And if it's not enough, it's not enough. So yeah, I spent my whole weekend doing that. I sent that across to the agency on the Sunday night at like 11 o'clock. And the guy that I was dealing with emailed me back straight away being like, Jack, this is amazing. Can you come in for a meeting next week? And I was just like, oh my God, it's been worth it. It's been worth it. And I think actually they already at this point had decided they wanted to go with me, but I think they just wanted to get me in to like meet me and see what I was like as a person.
Mhm.
So yeah, I went in and I got the job for that. And that was 3 or 4 days of shoots. And this was a new client for them. And then before
And
that shoot,
actually, was that pitch like a standalone pitch? You didn't have to go and present it to anyone. All your ideas were literally in that deck that you sent over.
yeah, all my ideas were in that deck. And then I think the agency then pitched it to the client
Okay.
themselves. So they were trying to win this client.
Mhm.
So I kind of like knew what was at stake. And I think looking back, wise choice not to get me in that room to pitch. I was like 22, I think. And I wouldn't have had a clue what to say. I'd have been so nervous.
Yeah, probably rambled
Yeah.
a lot.
Oh God, for sure. Probably like I am now. And yeah, before that shoot had even actually, the period between me getting that brief and the shoot date happening was, I think, a period of maybe 2 months. And there was loads of iterations that I had to do. And I didn't really understand like how much I should be charging for all of this,
Yeah,
but I didn't really care. Looking back now, I probably could have got a little bit more than I did, but again, didn't care. And then yeah, because I was just showing like pure commitment to the project, um, they then said like, we've got these 2 other shoots. Would you come and help on them? And one of them was for Puma and one of them was for Reebok. And I was like, oh my God, this is all happening. It's all coming together.
yeah,
Um,
amazing.
yeah. And then, yeah, so I got this Puma shoot and I was thinking, this is the best day of my life. I was getting to work with a CrossFitter and 2 other athletes. And they said that I kind of had like free reign of what team I brought in. So I brought in a DOP and director that were the close friends of mine. And they hooked me up with a production team. And I had my friend that was an assistant, my other friend that was a hair and makeup artist. Again, like putting the importance on like building that network, because that's really, really valuable. Like if you've got if you get a job and you know the people to bring in for it, it's a massive win, because finding people that are good at their job is hard, and it just cuts a lot of time. So yeah, on that day we were shooting, and it was 3 different locations on one day of a shoot. And I'm sure, as you know, like 3 different locations on one day across London is a lot.
That's a lot to fit in. Yeah.
If I'm fit in. But I think in that, even though it was very early on in my career, because I knew that I was surrounded by people that I fully respected and trusted, and that also were my friends and wanted the best for me and the project, I felt completely calm.
Yeah.
And I think that's really key as well. I think having a good team around you is super important. And I don't even know where I heard this from years ago, but I always try to make sure that I know the least about that particular area. So if I'm working with a video editor, I don't want to know more than them. I want them to be so much more confident than I am with everything they're talking about. Because essentially that's the reason why, as a creative director or head of creative, that you're pulling in these team members, or any project you're on. You're putting these people to make the project better. They're bringing in knowledge that you don't have. And that's exactly what I had on that day. I was surrounded by people that I really, really respected. And yeah, I went to bed that night and I was just grinning, being like, this was like a dream come true. Like everything's
Mhm.
finally happening. And it sounds so like a bit of an eye roll to say, but at the start of that year, I wrote out a full list of all the brands that I wanted to work with. and the sort of people that I wanted to be in rooms with, and then friends of mine that I wanted to learn from. And that was 2018 or 19, I can't remember. And the top brand on that at the time was Reebok, because they were the main sponsor of the CrossFit Games. And then it happened. I was on a Reebok shoot. And the one thing I find funny about when things come true, or projects come along and dreams start to happen, is they never quite come to you as you think they're going to come to you.
No,
So
never.
it wasn't like I was, flying over to Reebok HQ and getting to sit with their creatives, but it was still, I still had my hands on a project that was related to it. And I truly believe that was down to having such a clear internal direction on where I wanted to head and what I wanted to do. And I think that's hard to do. It's hard to know. And I think it's something that now I look back on, I'm so grateful that I did have. I think to find passion and then to find direction with that passion is super, super difficult. And it's a privilege. So if you know what it is you want to do, like really hold it close and go for it. Because there've been periods of my career where I completely lost direction and I haven't known what it is that I wanted to do. And in those moments, I've really realized, like, God, this is hard. Like, when you don't know where it is you want to head, it's really difficult because your internal compass is completely off and you start to feel like, well, what am I doing with my life? What am I doing with work? This all seems pointless. And my only bit of advice in that is keep yourself inspired. Like, keep talking to people, go back to those people that have inspired you in the past or pulled you out of your hole. And I'm not just saying like your best friend, I'm talking like people that you've met that are also creatives that understand. Like, a lot of my friends, I'm grateful that a lot of my friends are creative, but a lot of my best friends also aren't creative. So they don't really understand the sort of like the pains and struggles that we're going with. So just surround yourself with people that are not just like-minded, but understand the struggle. Because they will give you that reality check to pull you out of that hole and make you realize and remember who it is you are. Or just help you, give you that step up to push you where you need to go. But yeah, I think writing down and sitting and really thinking about where it is you want to go in your career, even just this next 6 months, you haven't got to think long term, but just start thinking, like, write down all the names of the people that it is you know in the industry, and then right next to them, it sounds quite opportunistic, but start writing next to them the sort of skills that you can learn from them and the sort of expertise they have. And you'll start realizing that you have a really solid network. And even if you don't, you might start seeing gaps and being like, God, you know what? I really need a great video editor or a great soundy or a great lighting guy. And then you can start to navigate and see who people know. But don't just keep waiting for these things to happen. You have to go out and try and put some motion in control.
Definitely. I think it's so good that you had that, like, you knew what you wanted to do from that point, like marrying fitness and creativity, marrying those two. Now we talk about it, it seems like such an obvious thing to do, but I think when you're in it yourself, it's actually a really tough thing to kind of get together. But you had that drive, I guess, and just that, thought to write out a list of the brands you want to work with and the people that you can learn skills on. I feel like so many people wouldn't have even thought to do that or think, that's a stupid thing to do. But look, you've proved that it does work. You've written it out, and then what? You tick two brands off that list pretty much. Maybe not straight away, but within like your first year of writing that down, which is incredible. So, okay, so you did Puma and you did Reebok.
I then done like an Under Armour shoot, and these were like all under the umbrella of brand campaigns for Sports Direct. So the way that it works is like brands put, as I'm sure you know, like they put specific budget towards Sports Direct to be like, make us a campaign for your store, because a Puma campaign that might be like global and on billboards isn't going to be the right sort of creative or have the right sort of models in it, for example, for a specific store or a specific brand that sells.
No, you need to do it for the Sports Direct customer rather than a specific Puma customer, for example. Yeah.
So that was all going well, and then COVID happened.
Oh no.
I was lucky. Like I still had work through it, but a lot of the creative industry just like massively shut down.
Yeah. How did
the
you
one,
navigate it? Like a lot of working from home, I guess.
yeah, a lot of working from home. I was very lucky that I had a couple of freelance clients that I was on a retainer with.
Hmm.
Um, I was actually doing some like social media management,
Okay.
some brands,
Was that
and
kind of your first dip into social media management, or had you done any of that
no,
before?
yeah, I would say it is. I mean, I think what you'll find, and this is also something that can be like quite something that can also be quite freeing. I would say is we think we know every brand in the world, but there are going to be brands out there that have started 6 months ago that are looking
Hmm.
for your expertise. Brands that you have never heard of. I've now worked for a couple of companies that have given me a lot of work that up until I discovered them either on LinkedIn or they reached out, I'd never even heard of.
Yeah, yeah.
And they've given me great experience and they've helped my career so much. And that's something I was pretty hot on as well, just like trying to find small brands on Instagram. And it was a different landscape then. Like it was, I feel old saying that, but it was a different landscape then. Yeah, social media wasn't the beast that it is necessarily now. Um, so yeah, I was doing a bit of social media management for a couple of small brands, and that helped and pulled me through. I was doing some like brand identity for some um, brands. I was working with a graphic designer, and again,
Hmm.
all startup companies, but it really helped pull me through COVID. And I was doing a bit of, once the studio started to open up again, I then went back to ASOS and did a little bit. And then by the end of that year, I then went in house for the first time at a menswear fitness brand, and I was there for about a year.
And what was
And
that role?
it was head of creative.
Okay.
The title was slightly different, which is something that I think we can probably get onto in a second.
Hmm.
But yeah, the role was essentially head of creative there.
What made you go into a full-time role?
I think by the time that I come out of COVID, I just wanted some stability,
Hmm.
and I had a bit of fear that the industry wasn't where I thought it was before COVID. And but yeah, the main thing I think for me was just stability. And I thought maybe it's time to just try to see if this works. I've been freelance for the past 4 or 5 years, and it can be tough. You know, when it's quiet and that work isn't there, it can be really scary. And my one bit of advice for that is always like try and get 2 to 3 months rent saved up. I know things are tough, and I know cost of living is through the roof, but like that little buffer is going to help you so much. So even if you have a few months of like scrimping and saving just to get that there, it will just keep your head like a lot clearer. Um, and also always put a bit of money by for your taxes. People that got to the end of the tax year and then were like, "Oh, I'm going to start putting my bill together now." I'm like, "What?" So yeah, pay your taxes and save as much as you can. I know it's really boring. Um,
No, but it's those fundamental things that you have to do when you're freelance, especially like because people forget about it and then
yeah,
you're stuffed.
yeah, and there
Yeah,
will be months when it goes quiet. Like
yeah,
unless you are like a unicorn out there, like it's going to be quiet at some point, and you're going to need that
yeah,
buffer there. Um,
definitely. And I think what's good as well, you just said like after COVID, you did go back to ASOS for a little bit as well. I think it's don't be too proud to you. This might sound a little bit bad, but I guess you'd moved on from ASOS. You weren't being a producer in the ecom studio. You were being a creative director for these big brands like Puma and Reebok,
mm,
but you're not too proud. You'll go back and you'll do that work to
yeah,
help you, get through a quiet month or, anything like that, which I think is really, really important as well.
for sure. And I think the important thing to remember with that is, and we all know it by now, but like what you see on social media isn't it? Because
100%.
nobody on social media would have known that I was still slogging it out at ecom studios to try and like pay my
Mhm.
bills. Like these campaigns weren't paying me enough, or what I wasn't getting them regularly enough to like live off. I was still counting on that work to come through, and I was very aware of that. So be humble with it, because and don't, well, yeah, be humble with it because it could all fall apart. You don't know
Yeah,
what next month is like, but also be humble with it because I met you at an ecom studio. You don't know who you're going to meet in these
yeah,
places that can help you out and the sort of network you're going to have. So never be too proud for any sort of job, because especially if you're freelance, you're going to need to pay them bills while you're getting things in motion. Um, yeah, no, there wasn't a fear for me about going back there. I always knew that it was like a means to an end. Like I had to do X in order to achieve Y. Um, and I met great people there. I met photographers that I still work with now at
Yeah,
those studios.
100%. You do meet really great people working in ecom studios. I feel like ecom studios get a bit of a bad rep, don't they, for,
I
you
do.
know, not being very creative, but you still meet fantastic creatives at those studios.
For sure, because we all, again, not that I'm bashing anyone that's working at ecom studios, but everyone starts somewhere,
Yeah,
and you don't know where people are going to head. Um, yeah, there's photographers that worked at ASOS, like I said, that I still work with now. They're very good friends of mine, and you'll meet the odd person that matches your vibe completely with the sort of creative that they want to do. And when you're in
definitely.
those spaces, like talk to people about your goals and your dreams, and like learn about where they want to head, because it might work out perfectly for you both. You might be able to do
Or they might have a friend that they can put you in touch with to get a little bit of experience in that area as well.
exactly. So never be too proud and utilize that network again,
Yeah,
always.
100%. 100%. So before we come on to full-time work,
Hmm.
I wanted to ask because I think you mentioned you weren't sure like how much you should be sort of charging at that point when you were creative director, and you didn't really know what to put into the pitch deck, so maybe you went a little bit overboard on those first few. How did you learn what you should be charging, and how did you actually set your rates, and how did you figure all those bits out?
So I think there is a level of fluidity that you need to have. Um, I wouldn't say that I figured out a set rate now, even if I was going to do
Hmm.
freelance work. I think it always depends on, yes, how much time it's going to take you, but two, what are you going to get out of this that's going to possibly progress your career if you're early on in your career?
Yeah,
Um, and also look at the brand and learn about their scale. Of course, if you get a brand like, I don't know, Apple come to you and they're trying to give you pennies, don't take it. Or maybe you do take it for the opportunity. It might be perfectly aligned with what you want to do. A lot of the time, you find out these huge brands, their budgets are tiny because that whole thing, we're going to pay you an exposure. But sometimes it can help. So when I first started, I didn't really know. I think I was charging like £50 more than what I was getting paid in the ecom studios. Because I thought, okay,
right.
that's a really big jump if I ask for £50 more. Like, I don't want to go too high, otherwise they'll think that I'm too expensive. And I
Hmm.
could have probably been charging hundreds more than what I was. But again, I don't I don't regret my naivety in that, because it really did help. In the long run, it did give me that experience. But in terms of setting your rate, I would say there's a APA rate card that you can look at, but that is for the general industry. But it's more so on like bigger projects, I would say have some flexibility with it. Again, there's going to be brands that come to you that haven't got the budgets that you are necessarily looking for, and I'd just be flexible with that. There's some brands that I've charged minimal for because it's a brand that I really wanted to help or work with,
Yeah,
or it's my friend's company that I wanted to help them. So it is something you'll figure out, and you will get to a point when you're a few years down the line when you start to understand what brands will start offering you, and you'll start to understand where your base should kind of like sit within that, and you'll start to be able to notice within that when brands are taking the piss and trying to like massively undercharge you. But again, don't be afraid to maybe ask other people in the industry, especially if you're early in your career. I think other people might respect the fact that if you're like, look, I'm just starting out, I actually really don't have any idea what it should be, how much I should be charging, sorry. People in that field are going to help. Like, we all know what it's like to be there and have no clue, and no one
yeah,
wants to be mugged off by these brands. So unfortunately, I can't say like what the set calculation is on how to work out your rate, but I would say look at what you're going to get out of it. Look at what possible exposure there is with that brand and how it can help the portfolio, and also look at the amount of time it's going to take you to do that job, and see if it's really worth your time. Because sometimes these brands can try and get a lot of work out of you for not very much. Um, yeah, there isn't a set rhyme or reason with it, I'd say. Looking on LinkedIn as well is quite helpful. Like when you start connecting yourself with freelance recruiters, you'll start to see like the base rate of like an editor, for example, and what they're charging, and you'll start to see the base rate of a copywriter or a creative director, and you can see even in the difference between, there might be 3 different job postings for a creative director, for example, and they might all vary for £100 of what they're offering. So it does fluctuate. Each brand's going to have a different set budget for that project, and I don't think you should be too proud to not take something that's lower paid, because it's going to be good for your portfolio for sure.
Yeah, definitely weigh up that experience, isn't it?
Yeah, and I hate to be that person. Oh, you got to work for free. I know I've said that like when you first start, but sometimes you do, and I think the issue some people have now as well. And I sound like such a millennial saying this, like. I think people expect too much too early on. That you've got to earn your stripes. You've got to show them that you're worth this job.
Yeah.
So you're going to have to do stuff for free to get that portfolio together.
Well, even when you're in a full-time job, you've got to do the next level of job before they offer you that job, to progress in your full-time career. So it's a similar thing. It's unfortunate that you don't get paid. And it's definitely one of, you've got to have some sort of backup plan. Like both of us, you're not from London either, are you?
No.
Like neither of us are from London, so we had to have some sort of plan to get us to London in order to do all that free work, isn't it? So, you've got to figure out how you can sustain it to do it, which is a tough thing, but sometimes got to be done.
Yeah, exactly.
All right, so let's move on to head of creative. So you said you started off as a head of creative, or essentially a head of creative, in that men's fitness brand. Which brand was that? And can you tell us, I guess, the responsibilities within that role and maybe how they differ to your head of creative now?
So that was a brand called Vanquish Fitness.
Yes.
It's a menswear fitness brand that's focused on the bodybuilding community, and it's a startup company. So when I got there, I think the maximum amount of headcount in that company was maybe, in like head office, 10, if that.
Wow, small, yeah.
Small for the size of their success. I was leading a creative team of 5 people there, one of them being an editor, and then a couple of graphic designers, and a producer. And with that, I was leading everything on the marketing campaigns. I didn't touch like everyday social so much there, but everything for product launches, which were sometimes twice a month, I was leading on that. So that would have been creative concepting, pitching to the directors, doing all the pre-production for the shoot, and then directing the shoot and leading all of the post-production as well for that until it went out to launch. And also leading all of the website imagery for the e-com store.
Amazing. So literally end to end, coming up with the initial look and feel, delivering that, and then pushing that out to...
Yeah, which is the benefit of working with these like smaller startup companies is, yes, it can be stressful that you've got to have your hands on everything, and it can be stressful that there's not the structures in place and the team in place that you need, but you do get the opportunity to then get your hands on as many things as possible and take responsibility of things. And you never know what that next job's going to be looking for. And the thing that you didn't think was very important about your role might actually be a really standout feature to that next company that's looking for you. So get your hand on as much as you can. Don't overwhelm yourself, and make sure you still do a good job. But I would say when you're looking at these smaller companies, don't be deterred because they are a smaller company. Don't always have your eye on the bigger brands, because like I mentioned earlier, these brands that you've maybe never heard of, I'd never heard of Vanquish Fitness until I started to look into it. Gave me a great step.
100%. What was it like working at a startup as well?
Working at a startup is great. It's very exciting because there's so much going on and it's very fast paced. But like I said, you can get great experience and get exposure to events and shoots that you might normally not get to do because brands are just willing to try something new because they haven't got all these structures and systematic corporate things in place. So you get the opportunity to like play around a bit more. I think the benefit of working in startups is you do have a chance to like trial and error with things. Not everything has to be, like I mentioned, signed off by everyone, from like the board of directors and all this stuff. So you get great experience. But I would say, there are challenges in startups that them systems aren't always there, and the team that you always need aren't always there, like the resource.
Yeah.
So it has its pros and cons. But I would say, especially while you're early in your career, like get in those startups because you get so much experience. And I think the main thing you get as well is exposure to other parts of the business. You don't normally get to sit in a room next to finance or next to the head of growth who's doing all the paid ads, or next to the design team. And in startups, you do. You get to sit with these people, hear what they're doing, learn about what they're doing, collaborate with them, come up with ideas. So that is one of the benefits of working in a startup in a smaller company. You get exposure to different sides of the business that you might not get if you're working in a bigger company.
Yeah. And you said you managed a team of like graphic designers, editors, but I guess you didn't have specific experience within those roles. So how did you find navigating that, managing people that you, I guess, don't have hands-on experience with their specific role?
Yeah, I think that the key thing to even note there is like beyond even understanding their specific role, is understanding how to manage people. I didn't
Yes.
know how to do that, and at that stage, and it was trial and error for me. And I look back now, and I've now got a lot more confidence in doing that. And there's things that I do now that I wouldn't have had the balls to do then.
Oh,
But
yeah.
managing people and managing your team is one of the key parts to not just any management role, but a creative director role. You need to make sure, the way I tried to always look at it was, okay, I don't know the technical word for what you need to click on After Effects to get this. I need to try and give you feedback in the clearest way that I would understand if I was receiving it. So if I'm giving feedback to you, I want to make sure that there's an opportunity for you to ask questions, for one, but I want to make sure that I'm giving feedback to you in the way that I wish to receive feedback. So that's being constructive, that's being as polite as you can and friendly as you can, which can be
Mhm.
difficult at times when deadlines are close, but there's no reason to lose your rag. Like it's a skill to learn. Like composure, you need to have it. But I'd say that's the main thing there, because I also made it very clear when I met this team. I said, like I said to you, I was like, I don't know the technicalities of what to press on that camera, or what to press on After Effects, or how to do this on Illustrator. You guys are the best people in this business for that, and I want to keep it that way. So if I've got a suggestion and you don't think it's the right thing to do, let's collaborate. Let's have like a back and forward with it. Let's see how we can push this forward. Because I'm going to say something and you'll know better than me at
Yeah.
it. So I'd say if you're managing them teams and being a creative director, don't think that your ego has to be the person that's right in the room all the time. Definitely not. You're there to lead the ship and be that like kind of center point if there is like conflict of ideas, and to make sure that you can stay on track for the brand purpose and the brand mission and that project mission. But learn from those people and give them some sort of confidence that you will let them speak and that their voice will be heard. But yeah, people management is, I think, a bigger skill than I think people think it is, and
100%. Have
take
you had
time.
many, have you had much training in management through your entire,
No,
management career? No,
no, I haven't had any.
no.
And maybe my current staff, members of staff, will say that I should have some. Who knows? Um, but no, I haven't actually. None.
Yeah. I mean,
Um,
I've not had a lot myself, and there's definitely been instances that I am faced with and I just don't know how to handle it.
mm,
And, I think it's asking other people in the industry, that are in a similar sort of level to you and, asking like, how would you deal with this? Like a tricky member of staff, it getting other people's sort of input, I've found personally very helpful because my gut reaction to something might not be the best way. And I
yeah,
think, yeah, what you said about giving someone as much information as possible and opening the forum as well, letting them talk to you and share their ideas is a really, really important one that I've definitely learned over
for
the
sure.
past however many years it's been. But
It comes with time as
yeah,
well. It's not something that it's like any sort of like soft skill, but learning how to deal with like conflict or pressure or disagreements within the workplace takes time to understand how you should face that. And the thing is, well, there's no like rhyme or reason or set way that you should manage this. Every
Yeah.
company's different, every team's different. But the one thing that I think is key is building those relationships. Building those relationships with your members of staff so that they respect you, not in a way that you're instilling fear in them, but in a way that they want to create good work for you and they understand the positions that you're in to try and make this company better or this project better. Once you build that kind of like rapport and respect and connection with your team, you'll get the best out of them.
Yeah.
And you can have like frank and honest conversations. And the way that I always try to approach it is that I don't ever want to be a manager or a creative director that is like talking down to people or coming in with my ego trying to instill fear, because I have seen that happen. I want people on that set to feel like they're my mate. I want them to respect me, but there's no reason why I shouldn't be talking to you like we're on the exact same level, because we are. Even if you're junior member of staff and I'm senior, we're still on the same level. We're all here trying to do the same thing. So yeah, just respect people and don't be a dick.
Yeah, definitely. So what's your team at Evolve You like now?
So at Evolve You, as head of creative, I manage a team of 3 internal members of staff, and then we're constantly working with external freelancers on different projects. And that can range from like videographers to editors to gaffers to sound guys. And then we work very closely with the social team. So the whole marketing team in total at Evolve You is about like 10 to 15, I would say, if we're including like growth in that as well. Very, very collaborative environment. And again, like I said about working in startups, you're getting a lot of exposure to a lot of different people and sides of the business. We're not just pushing out content that's for marketing. We're also producing content that goes in app and then goes out for paid ads as well. So there's a lot of different people that I have to like kind of collaborate with on projects. And I think the one key thing that I bring to this role that maybe wasn't there before is project management. And I think that is something, when you are a creative director or head of creative and you're leading a project management is super, super important. Looking at those timelines and seeing what is actually possible from your team in that time with the resource you have is something you need to be looking at. And it's something that you need to be flagging from the get-go. So once you've built out that timeline, you can start to say like, look, I need X amount more resource in order to get this done. If I can't get this done, I can't get this resource. What do you want me to do? And then you can go to your like direct line of report and figure that out. But yeah, I work with quite a big team at Evolve You because we all work together.
What are your 3 direct reports? What are their titles? What are they doing?
So I've got an in-house videographer and editor, a junior graphic designer, and a head of brand / senior graphic designer on the team.
Oh, okay, cool. So it's still over multiple sort of areas, similarly to Vanquish.
Yeah. I don't think as well now, unless you go in-house as like an in-house DOP, you need to be able to understand different roles, especially if you're leading a creative team. You need, again, I still don't know the technicalities of graphic design. I wish I knew more. I don't know the technicalities completely of like shooting and video editing. But again, I can give direction and I can give clear direction on what it is I want and what I don't want and what will work and what won't work. So yeah, I think you need to start getting exposed to different roles, even if you're just like set in photography. It's super, super handy for you to have a bit of info and intel on graphic design and art direction as well.
Okay. Could you give us a bit of a day in the life of a head of creative at Evolve You?
Yeah. So funnily enough, the higher you go in businesses, the more meetings you find yourself in.
Yes.
Every single day I start with a creative stand-up. I think that's super, super important. So every day at 9:15, the full creative team meet and we talk about all the projects that we're currently working on and every single deliverable that is due to be accomplished on that day. That's also then an opportunity for my team to like flag and raise things that they're having issues with or roadblocks they've got in place. And it depends what kind of like time we're in. So it might be booking in meetings for reviews with video editors or reviewing graphics for branding, working with the social team to produce some like evergreen content, working with the paid ads team to push out paid ads in time for the launch, creating assets that are going in app ready for the program launch, it really does vary every single day. But I think the main thing you need to make sure you're doing in these sorts of roles is just having that FaceTime with your team every morning to figure out what the problems may be and what's being accomplished that day as well. But if we're not in office, then we could be on set shooting. Sometimes we're shooting for up to like 8 days in a row.
Oh, wow.
It can be a lot. But in those situations, like preparation is key. I think preparation before any shoot is key. Not only just on a timing schedule to know what it is you've got to get in what amount of time, but having your like shot list ready and being super clear at the start of every day what it is you're looking to achieve that day. So
Yeah.
it does really vary, like a day in the life of like a head of creative at a company that I'm at. You could be on set, you could be in office, you're in like leadership roadmap meetings. It fluctuates, it changes.
And do you have your own in-house studios, or do you use external studios for all of your shoots?
Yeah, we always use external studios for a lot of our shoots because we're producing a mix of like campaign content for marketing, but we also produce like what we call like on-demand videos in app. So within the app, we sell training programs, and a lot of those programs might just be set programs, but some of those might be like follow-along classes. So they
Yeah.
might be between like 20 to 40 minutes. So if we do that, we'll be shooting in a soundproof studio for like 9 days straight to try and get enough
Yeah.
content for that. So yeah, we don't have a studio in-house that we use, as much as I would love one. Sometimes just cost-wise, it doesn't work out
Yeah,
efficiently
no,
to have that
that's
in-house.
fair enough. Yeah. Are you shooting like every week, or is it kind of like a seasonal thing or like a drop thing that you're working
Probably
on?
shoot maybe every 3 to 4 weeks
Hmm.
at the moment. And then when we do shoot, it's normally a minimum of like 3 to 4 days.
Yeah.
8 days. We kind of like got a bit of a knack to it now. But for example, if we have our trainers over from Canada or the US and they're here, we utilize that as much as we can to get campaign content, to get in-app content, to get social first content, not just around a launch, but like evergreen content that can be pushed out in a few months' time.
Yeah.
And again, that all comes down to planning, to figure
Yeah.
out what you're going to need. But yeah, it can fluctuate.
And does the planning for each different type of shoot, so you just mentioned like socials, evergreen, and
Yeah.
app content and that kind of stuff, is the planning for that generally the same, or do you treat each shoot sort of in a very
Yeah,
different way?
I would say so. So what we normally do as a company is that we all sit, every head of department or every like project lead from each department will come into a room and like figure out what they need from that shoot. So the growth team might tell you what paid ads they need. The product team will tell you what excuse me. The product team will tell you what deliverables they need. The social team will tell you what they need. And once you get that in a full list, me and the producer will then go away and figure out a shoot schedule for that. We've kind of got a bit of a knack to it now. Like we start to understand what it is you're going to need. Like we know what goes in app. We know what needs to go on social.
Yeah.
That fluctuate a little bit. But yeah, again, that's taken time. And it does change because if you're going to, again, if you're having trainers over from the US or Canada, like I said, you want to utilize that amount of time you have with them. But yeah, there is a bit of structure that's come into play. And again, I think in startups, finding structure can be difficult. So if you can find a way to help implement that, I'm sure everyone's going to feel like thankful for it.
Yeah, definitely. So I guess your career has moved from fashion into fitness, with
Mm-hmm.
obviously still the thread of the creativity, but what's like the main differences you would say between shooting or like planning shoots and executing shoots for fashion and fitness?
I would say that with fashion, there is that mix between like content for ecom, for example, and then
Mm,
editorial content. And editorial content, you get to be a lot more creative with that. You get to tell a bit more of a story through the visuals.
yeah,
And with fitness, while there's still a lot of stories to tell, and the thing that's amazing about where I'm at now is how many women we actually help on this app is incredible. And the stories we get in are amazing. So there's always stories to tell, I think, on both sides. But I would say the main difference is, I'd say the main difference with creative between fashion and fitness is how far I personally think you can push it and how conceptual you can get. There's that, working in fitness, you're selling a specific thing. You're selling fitness, or you're selling fitness clothes. You're selling moving your body, and yes, possibly a mindset and a lifestyle as well. But within fashion, you're selling a dream, and you're selling like a full brand world with that.
Yes.
So yeah, I think that's the one thing I sometimes do miss about fashion. Just being able to go a bit more editorial, push the boundaries a bit.
Yeah. No, that's bad.
Yeah.
So what would you say are the most exciting parts of your role now, your head of creative role?
Definitely the shooting. Like, I
Yeah.
always love shooting. I just love being on set. I love working with the talent. I love working with the team, and building the relationship with the person you're shooting, I think is always super fun. And it's great when you get on set with someone and they fully trust you and they fully trust them. I have the luxury of working with, we have 7 different trainers on the app, and every single one is different to shoot with. And every single person brings a different energy or vibe to the shoot. And I'm not going to say I have favorites, but there's some people that come on and they want to give their all. Like, they are so into training and they absolutely love it, and they're so about it that is the best way to get the best shoot. If everyone on set knows exactly what they're there to get, and if the talent in front of you understands the vision and understands the purpose of what you're creating. And yeah, I love those days. We done a shoot last year in Toronto, and the talent was working with them. Like, it's probably my favorite piece of work to date, just because it felt like me. It felt like what I wanted to create. It told a story, and it told a bit of their story, and it looked beautiful. Yeah, it had a bit of a narrative to it. But yeah, my favorite thing is definitely shooting, for sure. I love it.
On the flip side then, what's the less glamorous parts of being a head of creative?
I think the less glamorous parts of being in these sorts of roles is understanding how much preparation goes into stuff, and then how many meetings you're going to be sat in. You're going to be turned to make decisions on the brand roadmap and the marketing roadmap and where things should be heading. You're deep in decks, you're deep in spreadsheets, figuring things out. And I think, like I mentioned before, project management is a huge part of putting off a successful shoot. And the only way you can do that is by being organized. And that's when you have to pull decks and you have to pull out them spreadsheets and figure things out. So that definitely is the less glamorous side of it. Yeah.
And I feel like a lot of people will get a head of creative role confused with like a creative director role. What would you say the differences are?
I would say that this industry tricks us a lot. I would say it really will depend what company you go into to see what role is actually meant with that title. Because I've looked at head of creative roles, I've looked at creative director roles in some businesses, and they're not actually you're not actually producing creative. You're leading the direction of the company from a marketing standpoint, or from a brand standpoint, and that can be very different to actually directing creative. Like, you'll probably find creative directors even in like financial companies and insurance companies that are leading where the business is going. So while I can't define like an exact split between what makes a head of creative and what makes a creative director, the difference that I find is that head of creative is more what it says on the tin. You are leading the creative in that space. And yeah, creative director, it can be a fluctuating term. I think one thing that I would kind of note for everyone that's listening in whatever sort of like line of creative work you're going into is just kind of watch out for that. I think that with certain roles like video editor, it's pretty self-explanatory of what it is. But now you have like heads of creative, social leads, creative leads, creative directors, senior social leads. Like, there's so many different terms now for these roles that are asking for so much from people. You've got to have so many strings to your bow now to even stand out. And some roles you look at on LinkedIn or wherever, like, they are taking the mick a bit.
So we're coming to the end of the episode. I feel like you've touched upon so many different things and given loads of little bits of advice. But before we finish, I want to know your number one tip for someone breaking into the industry, and then your number one tip for someone who's looking to go into a head of creative type of role.
I'd say my number one tip for people that are trying to break into the industry, and as cliche as it sounds, but okay, I'm going to give you two. Self-belief is super, super important. When you're walking into a room, even if you aren't the role that you think you need to be yet, make them people believe that you're that person. So if you want to be a creative director, you walk into that room with the confidence that you think those people are going to want of you to lead that project, because they will. They don't know what's going on inside your head. They don't know the nerves that you've got. So just really back yourself and really believe in it, because you can do it and you will find a way. And then secondly, utilize your network. Write down every single person that you know in the industry, and write down next to that person all the skills that that person has that you think you can learn from, or the industry that they're a part of, or the people that they might be able to connect you with. And you'll start to find this list of people that you're like, God, I actually know a lot of people. And you'll also find gaps in that of areas that you can find growth in. And you can start to look for different areas where you can connect yourself with other people. But yeah, self-belief, network, okay, I'll give you one more, and finding time. Take the time that you have and make the best use out of it, especially while you're young, because you've got a lot of flexibility. Make the errors, make the mistakes, do projects that you would never normally do or you don't think you want to do, because you will always learn something from it. And you'll always meet someone that one day will be beneficial to your career path. I'm sure of it. Sorry, I gave you three.
All good. What about a tip for someone who's trying to they're in the industry, but they're trying to get your type of role?
I would say a tip for someone that is trying to move into a head of creative role is think beyond creative. Think what's going to be expected from you in that sort of role from a managerial and business perspective as well. You're going to need to be able to plan. You're going to need to be able to communicate. You're going to need to be able to lead meetings, and you're going to need to be able to lead people. And that's super important. That's what's going to set you aside from just being creative and someone that can be head of creative. Because being a really creative person is great and it's amazing. You need to try and keep that fire alive. But you have to understand that the more senior you go in businesses, the more it's going to be expected of you and your output and your team. You've got more responsibility. You need to learn how to project manage and manage people and understand what clients want and communicate.
Thank you so much. It's been so great to talk to you.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
I hope you enjoyed this episode with Jack. I found this conversation to be truly inspiring. I hope you did too. If you did, I'd really appreciate if you leave a review, rate and subscribe. If you want to learn more, follow us on TikTok and Instagram at the Get to Know Podcast. But that's it for season 1. Join me in a few months for season 2, which I'm planning to be even bigger and better than this one. Let me know in the comments or reach out on socials for what type of guests you'd like me to interview. I want to thank all my listeners and guests for supporting me in this venture, and hope you've all enjoyed getting to know more about the creative industry. In the meantime, you can follow my freelance journey over on TikTok or Instagram at Morgan Williams Production. Plus, you can join me at my end of season networking event next week. There are still a few free tickets on Eventbrite, so go grab yours now. Just search Get to Know End of Season Networking Event. Speak soon!